Hello, guys. We have both Sara and Claire. Yes, hi, Sara, on the podcast today. And for those of you who can't see us, it is quite the vision, I will say, because we all three of us have bangs. Nothing weird, just we have bangs, and so there is really just like a line across our screen of bangs. Of three women with bangs.
Oh, so, man, I'm trying to grow my bangs out. I don't want these bangs right now. I hate to say it, I have to admit it, but I'm breaking from the pack.
Wow. This is crazy news. I am devastated because I think you look awesome with bangs.
Breaking news.
Yeah, breaking news. In the headlines.
Mine are too long. Literally, in the head, four headlines.
In the four headlines.
Ha, ha, ha,
ha. I mean, that's why I wear bangs, is just like four headlines. I don't know, just
literally,
cover up my four headlines.
You don't need Botox.
No.
Yes.
Just keep the bangs, keep the fringe.
Yes, exactly. Well, thank you for being here today. Very fun to have both of you on the podcast. The reason we're doing that is that we're going to let both of you kind of talk about your stories last week. Both were very incredible for sort of differing reasons, and I'll let you kind of, dive in on your own. But I'll just take us through last week's headlines just very briefly. Claire's story was the cover, and it was about USPSTF. I'm really not even going to try to explain that at this moment. I'm going to just make everybody wait for Claire's explanation. But it's a really, really huge story that just turned into something even bigger than we had anticipated. So really excited to dive into the details. Our second story was basically Sara's version of that exact thing, where I'm not going to necessarily touch it yet, but I'll let Sara kind of give the Spark Notes version of it, and we can talk about it in more detail. And then the other story that we had last week was just something that we kind of do whenever we have it available to us. We announce the members of the National Academy of Sciences, but only the people who are sort of in our field or tangential to our field. So it's just sort of like an oncology focused, announcement of the NAS members. So that was our issue last week, and it might sound light, but I think once we hear from Sara and Claire, it's going to feel not so light. So I'm going to have Claire maybe go first, and like I said, just the Spark Notes, and then we can dive in.
Sure. This is something we've been watching for about a year and a half now, but Kennedy has had his eye on overhauling the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force, which we call the USPSTF, which is a very difficult initialism for me to say. I always feel like I'm whispering like USPSTF. So I'm just going to call it the task force. The task force. So he's had his eye on overhauling the task force since kind of day one of his tenure at HHS. He's called it a couple of names, things like too woke, lackadaisical. And then at a recent Senate appropriations hearing about 2 weeks ago, he told Senator John Barrasso that he plans to swap out some members for specialists. So there are 16 members on the panel. 5 are rotating out this year, and I think they serve a 4-year term. And he wants to replace them with medical specialists, which is a really big shift because since 1984, the task force has been intentionally built around primary care doctors and methodology experts and not disease specialists. And the idea behind that is that you want people on the panel who can look at the data broadly, not folks who are, deep in one lane. And I guess what's at stake is, this group kind of quietly shapes a huge part of American healthcare. Their recommendations determine what happens in your routine doctor visits. So everything from like cancer screenings to preventive counseling. And under the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, they decide what insurers have to cover for free. So the stakes are high. And normally the task force puts out 25 guidelines a year. But thanks to repeated meeting cancellations, they put out about 5 last year, and none so far this year, which means a backlog is building. Everything from guidance on alcohol screening, at-home cervical cancer tests, which were just approved by FDA a couple weeks ago, support for perinatal depression, whether or not older adults should be taking vitamin D to prevent falls. The list goes on, and they're all stuck in limbo. And then to layer on that, last year, the Supreme Court expanded Kennedy's authority over the task force. So he can now dismiss members at will and even reject or pull their recommendations entirely. So that's a level of control the office has never really had before over a group that was designed to stay, somewhat insulated from politics. But yeah, the real flashpoint here is the reform itself, which is bringing in more specialists.
Managing and interpreting the billions of data points generated by genome sequencing and other cancer research has been a barrier to progress against cancer. But today, it's part of the solution, as more than 50 years of advances in computer processing power intersects with more than 50 years of cancer research. Learn more about Johns Hopkins Kimmel Cancer Center's AI initiatives and how they're helping physicians see cancer sooner and drive outcomes with unmatched speed and clarity at hopkinscancer.org/#AI. I mean, I don't know if this might be putting you on the spot here, but I am wondering if you could just speak a little bit more, because this is what I've heard sort of in the newsroom and you know, as you're editing the story and talking through the story, what I've heard is sort of this weird counterintuitive thing that you mentioned, where having specialists actually isn't necessarily what again is best. Maybe that's too subjective of a way to explain it, but just because that's very counterintuitive, and I know you explained it a little bit, but just maybe a little bit more detail would be helpful.
Sure. And it is counterintuitive because when Kennedy said that, which I don't know if it's the first time he said it, it's the first time that we picked up on it, and Paul was the one who flagged it, and he was like, "That's not normal. Specialists have never been on the task force." And so I did some digging and talked to some really helpful voices, including former members of the USPSTF. And so I guess on one hand, the story goes that specialists have been arguing for decades that they deserve a vote. Oncologists, radiologists, urologists, especially, they've all said, like, hey, we're the ones who are actually dealing with these diseases. And they are not shut out, to be fair. The task force does take their input very seriously. They're just not voting members. And that's intentional because specialists, by definition, have a narrower focus. So a breast oncologist, for example, might lean more toward aggressive screening, which is great for catching disease early, but it could also lead to overdiagnosis or overtreatment or unnecessary treatment across broader populations. So the task force instead, they lean heavily on generalists and data experts, people whose job it is to ask what's best for everyone. There is evidence. David Ransahoff told me that there's evidence of bias when you bring in specialists. But since ACA, I guess, was linked to the task force recommendations in 2011, I think. Don't quote me on that. There has been more pressure for them to include specialists on the panel, more lobbying efforts, and they suspect, experts suspect that Kennedy is hearing from a lot of lobbyists, and that is why he is pushing for specialists. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. I mean, it's just, I think what you were also like sort of alluding to this with how you were explaining it, but just how far the reach is of this sort of like, it seems so bureaucratic and so like USPSTF, like, it seems so insulated from maybe just like the average person or like, the average American, right? Like who's just going about their daily life necessarily. But it really does have very strong impacts. I'm thinking about obviously screening is, cervical cancer screening, multi-cancer detection screening, like all of these things are running through my head. But even more so, I think I'm thinking about the alcohol guideline story. And I'm probably going to butcher it because it's now been a few weeks. But, the idea that, within oncology, and actually it's been a year since I think I wrote this part of the story, right? But like within oncology, alcohol may have these sort of negative impacts, but the mortality impact might look the opposite, right? Like maybe, and I remember, I think it was Don Barry, I want to say, I'm going to have to check that. But he said something like the last thing you want is someone dying younger than they would have. But the on their deathbed, what they say is, see, mom, I didn't die of cancer, but they're dying earlier than they would have. Right. So it's like, there's definitely, I think, something, even us, being so oncology focused, I think that we could probably have some blind spots when just thinking about this. But I thought it was just interesting to kind of, You would think that you would want specialists, but was it Paul? I don't know. I don't want to out him, but was it Paul who said that having a specialty is almost a form of bias in this case because you just like you care, you see only these patients, and so it's going to impact your how you see disease and risk. Right. Of course, I mean, no one could fault anyone for wanting what's best for their population, and that's what they see and live every day. But it limits your perspective. And something I forgot to mention is that a comparison that's being made because we've watched what happened with ACIP, CDC's immunization panel, where all of those members were forcibly retired by Kennedy and then replaced kind of by his hand-picked replacement members. And
no one listens to ACIP anymore. The multiple sources said everyone's ignoring ACIP, and they are turning instead to other more trustworthy guidelines. However, with the task force, that can't happen. Like, nothing can replace the void of the task force. It does cover, like you were saying, preventive services from birth to death. Like, the scope is massive, and there is nothing that can just easily step up and take the place of that. So that's what makes this a bit more of like a very, very pivotal moment when it comes to, preventive medicine in the U.S., the foundation of preventive medicine in the U.S.
What a way to like wrap up that conversation. Just that.
Yeah. On that note.
On that note, Sarah, will you distract us from the horrors, the general horrors?
Oh, maybe I can add a couple more horrors.
Cool, yeah, there you go.
My story had to do with the company Replimune, and they have an advanced melanoma treatment called RP1. Essentially, they had applied for a biologics license application with the FDA, and it has been rejected not just once, but twice. So the recent news has to do with the second rejection and some of the reactions that we've gotten from oncologists, scientists, and patients. I've heard that from one oncologist that they were flabbergasted. I talked to a patient advocate that said that there is a lot of disappointment about this rejection. At least 75 people, this is a melanoma research foundation, and at least 75 patients have reached out in the few weeks since the rejection saying, hey, like, I really oppose this, and I wish it went a different way. And this all kind of ties into greater questions about what's going on at FDA in terms of leadership. There is one Wall Street Journal article, if I can pull it up right now, that said that at least 9 other companies have reported surprising regulatory decisions from the Center for Biologic Evaluations and Research. So there's a question about whether this is part of a greater trend of what's happening in FDA, where there's this just lack of predictability, kind of the rug being pulled under from them, the moving of the goalpost after different communications, and how, as a drug company, do we really get a drug through?
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder, Sarah, if you, and again, not to put you on the spot necessarily, but I do wonder about this sort of second rejection, because I covered the Atara Bio story, and that was sort of like a parallel story, a similar situation with a different company who expected an approval and, like you said, had the rug ripped out from under them. And so I'm just wondering, because my coverage of that story, they are, I think, planning on resubmitting, and I assume that's what happened here with Replimune, that they resubmitted after a surprising rejection. And I'm just wondering, did they expect to get the approval this time around? And I guess I'm wondering about that sort of dynamic, was the second rejection different?
I mean, I haven't talked specifically to anybody at the company, but from the sources that I've talked to in the patient advocacy world and the scientific oncology world, it seems like it was surprising, not so much in terms of maybe, the political atmosphere or these questions around really what's going on behind the curtain, but more so in terms of just the data. The data is really robust. And so when you look at the data and you look at some of the comments that they had in the complete response letter, a lot of people were just kind of dumbfounded.
Yeah, it just didn't make a lot of sense. That's very odd. Well, yeah, I know that that's definitely been sort of a conversation, like I said, in the rare disease space, but also just, for any developer, any drug developer, having sort of that stability or like you're able to expect something from FDA, especially as you invest billions or millions of dollars into drug development, especially clinical trials.
And the company Replimune is kind of in hot water at this moment. They had laid off at least 200 people from the news stories that I read since the second rejection. And as you can expect, the stock price has also totally plummeted. It has gone from $8.50 in the beginning of April to $2.46. And this is from May 1st. So, I mean, that's like fourfold decrease almost. So there's a lot of questions about what's going to happen to the company. And then as a result, what's going to happen to the drug? Is Replimune going to pull through? Is another drug sponsor going to, is going to step up? Will we not have access? Will the oncology community not have access to this drug because of, the FDA rejection? It's just unclear at this moment.
That's terrible. And like you said, with the patients reaching out for it, that's especially, biting. It doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have to keep a track of it. Is there anything that we missed with that story, Sarah, before I wrap up? I'm sorry, I'm not very, I need to go read your story. It's the main thing. I'm very curious about it.
Like, we reported and wrote that story in like 2 hours.
2 hours!
Like, maybe less, maybe more, a little bit more. But I was like, how did you do that? It was amazing.
I don't know. I just sent a barrage of emails and prayed to the gods.
Yeah.
And
we were like, we need a second story, and no one knew what to do. It was like a kind of a crisis moment. And so Sarah is an angel. She's a hero.
This is what all
letter.
the beautiful breaking news reporters experience on a daily basis. And I am not jealous of them. So God bless you guys.
Yeah. Breaking news reporters, we commend you.
Yes,
I
am not cut out for that lifestyle.
On the occasional time, that's we know that. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me. A little bit of a short and sweet podcast this week, but very dense, very, very interesting. And all of the listeners, please go read the stories because, like I said, definitely a lot more in there to explore. So thank you, and see you next week.